Hilchos Avodas Yom Hakippurim, Perek Revi, the laws of the temple service on Yom Kippur, chapter 4. This is one of the shortest chapters in the Rambam in terms of how many halachas it has. It's just got 2, although they're each considerably long. And essentially, what this chapter is putting everything we've learned till now in chronological order. The Rambam in the first 3 chapters discussed the major themes that would happen throughout Yom Kippur in the Holy Temple, but he didn't necessarily put it exactly in the order that it would happen. Today, the Rambam begins, as you see it in the opening words, Seder kol hamasim shebiyom zeh kahu. The order of all the procedures that would happen on this day went as follows. And the Rambam literally delineates, he walks you through from the moment the Yom Kippur service started till the moment it ended. And it's not just because the Rambam is a history book, which he's not. The Rambam is a halacha book. The reason that he tells us this order and why it's so important to know it is because, as we're going to see tomorrow, a big topic of tomorrow's chapter is the idea that if the Kohen Gadol were to switch the order of certain parts of the service, that could disqualify it. So you have to know the proper order that it used to happen. And this way, you can understand what changes are okay or not okay. Nevertheless, it is a fun walkthrough, just getting familiar with exactly what would happen on Yom Kippur. And actually next week, when Yom Kippur actually is, the next Shabbat, part of the Musaf service, a big part of the daily prayer, the prayers in the middle of the day, is the Avodah, where we recount the entire service of the Kohen Gadol. We kind of relive the experience of what it was like to be in the Holy Temple on Yom Kippur. And for us, we get a little bit of a sneak peek, a little bit of a taste before that to prepare ourselves. So the Rambam begins with how Yom Kippur used to start, and it actually wasn't by daytime, it was actually by night. Kachatzois halayla, at midnight, mefisin litrumas hadeshan, they would conduct a raffle for the removal of the ashes. The first thing that was done in the morning in the temple every day was the removal of a bit of the ashes from on top of the Mizbeach. As we saw in the laws of the daily sacrifices and services, there was always a raffle for this. One Kohen was chosen, and he would be the one to do this. Usually this raffle was done closer to dawn. On Yom Kippur, because there was so much to do, and we wanted to get things rolling as soon as possible, they would do this raffle at midnight. Additionally, they would set up the wood piles on the Mizbeach, and then they would actually remove the ashes from the Mizbeach, in the way that they would do it every day, using the order that we explained in the laws of Tmidin, in the laws of the daily sacrifices and services, till they reached the stage of the slaughtering of the daily sacrifice. This is where the Kohen Gadol stepped in. Even though we learned that everything on Yom Kippur is supposed to be done by the high priest, because of Mishnah and others talk about the fact that these services of removing the ashes and setting up the wood isn't really called avodah. It's not really called a service, so it didn't have to be done by the high priest. There are others that debate that. The Rabbi once talked about it at length. He said maybe we should put the high priest in the raffle. He should, at least should have a chance of winning, although it may not be so respectful. But nevertheless, the classic understanding is that these things are preparatory. They're not part of the service, and therefore they didn't have to be done by the Kohen Gadol. So they were all done till they reached the point of the slaughtering of the sacrifice, and now the Kohen Gadol service begins. When it came time to slaughter the daily sacrifice, person sadin shel butz ben Kohen Gadol u'bein ha'am. So here, as we learned the other day, the Kohen Gadol, before he does any service and changes into his holy clothes, he needs to go to the mikveh. So they would hang up a linen curtain between him and the nation. First of all, it's for modesty. Just shouldn't see the high priest while he's immersing. But v'lama shel butz, why did they pick the linen material? So the Kohen Gadol should pay attention, should recognize that the special services of today are going to be done in linen white clothing. Yes, there's going to be the golden clothing, the regular high priest clothing for the regular services of the day, but the unique Yom Kippur services, those are going to be done in white linen clothing. And so that was a reminder of what's to come. At this point, the high priest was still wearing regular clothes. He was up all night, but he wasn't wearing any priestly garments. So he removes the regular clothes. The toivel, then he goes to the mikveh. The levish bigdei zahav, puts on the golden clothes, umekadesh yadav v'raglav, and washes his hands and feet, as we saw the other day, from the special jug, the golden jug that was reserved for the Kohen Gadol. Now, of course, this picture we had before is not accurate to this situation right now, because as you can see, the high priest is walking in wearing his golden clothes. At this point, he was wearing regular clothes. After the immersion, he switches into the golden clothes. I just put this picture for illustrative purposes. Anyway, he washes his hands and feet, and he's ready for the beginning services of the day. V'sheichet batamid reiv shnayim. The high priest would go over to the daily sacrifice. It's a bit of a far view, but you can see the slaughtering of the sacrifice happening over here. And he wouldn't do the entire slaughtering. He would slaughter a majority of the 2 pipes of the animal. in order to be considered a significant shchita, significant slaughtering, both pipes, the windpipe and the food pipe of an animal, have to be slaughtered in their majority. Usually, whoever was doing the slaughtering would slaughter it fully. But here, because the high priest had to do everything, both slaughtering and the next action, which was receiving the blood, the lifeblood, so he couldn't afford to slaughter the entire thing. That wouldn't give him time to catch the lifeblood. So he just slaughters a majority of the two pipes, umaniach acher ligmar ashchita, leaving somebody else to conclude the slaughtering process. Umekabel adam, right away he runs, receives the lifeblood coming out, spurting out of the animal's neck, v'zerker al hamizbeach k'mitzvasei, and then sprinkles it on the altar as the mitzvah was. Again, illustrative purposes, this is a regular Kohen. We're talking about the Kohen Gadol wearing his golden clothes. Then, afterwards, nichnas laheichal, he goes inside the heichal, the temple structure, umaktir k'teira shel shachar, and offers the morning incense. Umeitiv es, and also lights the lamps. Again, it was the Kohen Gadol, not a regular Kohen. Doing this, he lit the menorah. Notice the difference. This is the actual menorah. According to our authentic tradition, it was a diagonally shaped, not the curved ones. But again, I just borrowed some illustrations, so kind of ignore that difference, but just know that the true menorah, as the Rambam himself drew it, was a diagonal menorah. And the Kohen Gadol would light the candles. Then, umaktir evrei atamid. By this time, by the time he's finished with the incense and the candles, the Kohanim who were in charge of the daily watch would finish preparing, slicing up and cutting up and getting the daily sacrifice ready for offering. So by the time he came out, umaktir evrei atamid, he could offer the limbs of the daily sacrifice on the fire. Usually it was done by a bunch of Kohanim. On Yom Kippur, Kohen Gadol did it all. And then he would also offer his daily pancakes. There was 12 pancakes or pitas that were offered by the high priest every day, not just Yom Kippur, 6 in the morning, 6 in the evening, or according to the Rambam, half of all 12 in the morning, half of all 12 in the evening. And he would offer those, as well as the libations, the flour, wine, and oil that would accompany the daily sacrifice. All this was offered, kechol seder atamid shel kol yom shebi'arnu, following the exact procedure of the daily sacrifice that was brought every day. As we explained, it also applied equally on Yom Kippur. The achar tamid, after the daily sacrifice, while he's still wearing the golden clothes, makriv hapar v'shivas hakvasim shel musaf hayom, he would offer a portion of the additional Yom Kippur sacrifices, a bull and 7 sheep. There was also another goat and 2 rams, plus his personal bull, which we'll get to later. This was the communal bull and 7 sheep were offered at this point. So part of the musaf, part of the additional offering for Yom Kippur was offered now. And now that he's concluded the regular standard daily offerings, he moves to some of the unique Yom Kippur offerings. The achar kach, after this, mekadesh yadav v'raglav, he washes his hands and feet. Upeshet bigdei zahav, and he removed the golden clothes. V'toivel, he goes to the mikveh again, little curtain here. Here he's actually going up with the golden clothes. This reflects the current situation. He's going with the golden clothes. This was a mikveh that was on top of a chamber in the temple courtyard. It was called the Lishkas HaParva. We actually mentioned it, maybe not in the Rambam class, in my weekly Tanya class. Before Tisha B'Av, I switched and I taught a little bit about the temple. This parva was supposed to be, according to legend, a Egyptian magician who tried to observe the temple service, dug a tunnel into the Temple Mount, and he came up around this area. And when he was discovered, he was killed, because no non-Jew can be past a certain area in the Temple Mount. But they named the Lishka, the chamber around here, after him. And so the mikvah that the Kohen Gadol would use in Yom Kippur was above this parva chamber. So he would go up these stairs here, and he went to the mikvah. V'toivel, he immerses, v'leivish bigdei lavan, puts on the white clothes now, u'mekadesh yadav v'raglav, washes his hands and feet. Now that he's in the white clothes, he's going to do some Yom Kippur services. U'bala yetzel para, he approaches his bull. This is the personal bull that Aaron had to bring the Kohen Gadol and every high priest after him on Yom Kippur, as an atonement for himself and for his family and for the other Kohanim. Where was the bull situated? Between the ulam, the antechamber to the temple structure, and the mizbeach, right here in the middle. And it was positioned in a very specific way. Its general head was facing south, but its actual face was tilted to the west. So it was lined up on a north-south, and then they tilted the head to face the Holy of Holies, to face the west. With the high priest would stand to the east, behind the bull, facing also west, facing to the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And then as we sing the traditional tune, on Yom Kippur, if you're here in the minyan, you know the tune. He would lean his 2 hands on the head of the bull and recite confession. There's a very beautiful tune that we use to sing on Yom Kippur itself when we recite the Avodah. These are some tastes of it. He would say as follows: Ana Hashem, please God, Chatasi avisi pashati lefanecha ani uvesi. I have sinned inadvertently, I've sinned willfully, I've sinned rebelliously before you, myself and my household. Ana Hashem, please God, kaperna lachatoim v'la'avenis v'la'pshoyim. Please forgive those inadvertent sins, willful sins, rebellious sins, shechatasi v'she'avisi v'shepashati lefanecha ani uvesi, which I and my household have committed inadvertently, willfully, and rebelliously. As it's written in the Torah of Moshe, your servant, saying, for on this day, God atones for you to purify you. From all your sins, you'll be purified before God. Notice, he said the word Hashem's name 3 times. As the Rambam said the other day. Each time they would recite the name of Hashem, everybody would prostrate themselves and bow down. That's why you see in this picture, everybody's kind of bowing down. And that was the vidui, the first confession on the bull. Afterwards, he would perform the raffle, which we saw at length yesterday, on the 2 goats, and he would decide which one is the one going to God as a sin offering, which one's going to Azazel, to the cliff. The kosher lashon shel zahiris beresh hamishtaleyach, he would tie a red strand on the head of the goat that's being sent away, uma'amidai keneged beis shiluchay, and position it facing where it was going to be sent off. V'lanishchat keneged beis shchitasai, and he would position the goat that was going to be slaughtered towards the place where it was going to be slaughtered. After the basic conducting of the raffle and the setting it up, he would go back to the bull a second time, lean his 2 hands on its head and say the second confession. This time including also the other Kohanim, not just his family. The Kachu Eimer, he would say the following: Ana Hashem, please God, Chatasi avisi pashati lefanecha ani uvesi uvnei Aaron am kadeshecha. I have sinned inadvertently, willfully, rebelliously before you, myself, my household, and the sons of Aaron, your holy nation. Ana Hashem, please God, kaperna lechatoim v'la'avenis v'la'pshoyim shechatasi v'she'avisi v'shepashati lefanecha ani uvesi uvnei Aaron am kadeshecha. Please forgive the inadvertent sins, the rebellious sins, the willful sins, which we have sinned, me, my household, and the sons of Aaron, your holy people. Hakasav b'steras Moshe avdecha, as it says in the Torah of Moshe, your servant, the verse, on this day God will atone for you. And that was the second confession on the bull. And now the bull is ready to be slaughtered. This is the bull whose blood is going to be offered, sprinkled in the Holy of Holies, as we saw yesterday and we'll see again today. Right afterwards, he would slaughter the bull and receive its blood. He did both. And now, again, the blood of this bull is eventually going to be offered in the Holy of Holies, but not just yet. So he needs to hand it off to somebody who can mix it, so it shouldn't congeal. And he would place it on the 4th roived of the heichal outside. What is the roived? Some say it's the steps leading up to the heichal. The Kohen who was mixing the blood would stand on the 4th step going up. Others say it's a reference to what the Rambam called roived way back in the beginning of this book. When he described the temple structure itself, he described that there were these projections coming out of the walls of the actual heichal on all sides. They were called revadim. So the 4th projection, that's where he would put the blood down for the Kohen who was going to mix them to take it and mix it. And now he's going to offer the incense. How do you offer the incense? It's a whole process. First of all, the Kohen Gadol takes the fire pan. He goes up to the top of the Mizbeach and digs out some coals from the place close to the west side, closest to the temple structure itself. Shenamar, as it says, he's supposed to take the coals from on top of the Mizbeach, from before God. That means in the Mizbeach itself, you go to the area that's closest to before God, closest to the Holy of Holies. He goes down and places it also on the roived in the Azara. Here they describe it as placing it on one of the floor stones. This is the Kohen mixing the blood, and this is the fire pan with the coals waiting on the floor. Others would say it was on the 4th step over here, and still others would say it was on the projection outside of the temple structure. The point is, he placed the fire pan for a little break with the fire with the fiery coals. Now, the way the Keteris worked, I said it in short the other day, but more at length. The way it worked was there was this fire pan with coals. The Kohen would be given another little utensil with incense, the actual powder. He would bring them both into the Holy of Holies, pour the incense over the coals that would create the smoke. So here's what would happen. You have the machta with the coals is sitting there. they bring out the kaf, that's the container which is going to hold the incense. Ukli molek toides, with a little utensil full of the incense, daka min adaka, very, very fine. The chayfein mimena meloi chafnav, the high priest takes from this container his handful, a cupful, loy mechukais v'loy gedushais, not fully level, not too overflowing, ela tfufais, a little bit overflowing. A nice full handful. Hagadol lifi gadle v'hakatan lifi katne, there was no size. Whatever his hand size was, that's how much incense he would take. A big person according to his bigger hands, a smaller person according to his smaller hands, v'noisim l'sei hakaf, and he puts the incense into the kaf. So now, you have two things going on over here. See, this is the kaf over here. This is the kli that was full of the ketairas. The Kohen Gadol takes a cup full of the ketairas and he pours it into the kaf. So now you have the machta, the fire pan with the coals, and the kaf is holding the actual incense. And now he needs to walk inside to the Holy of Holies. And there's a problem. He has two things he has to carry inside. Obviously, one's going to go in his right hand, one's going to go in his left hand. But which one? Kvar b'yarnu, we already explained, says the Rambam, Shehilacha b'smoil poiseles b'dam ha'kodashim or b'shara avodas. That if a Kohen walks with something in his left hand, if it's blood of sacrifices or if it's another service, it disqualifies it. Ulefichach, and therefore, haya min adin, logic would dictate, sheyolich hamachta b'smoilei v'kaf haktoides b'yaminei, that the high priest should take the fire pan with the coals. It's not essential. That isn't the actual service. That isn't the actual ketairas. That isn't the actual incense. Let him take the fire pan in his left hand, the kaf haktoides b'yaminei, and the kaf, the utensil with the actual incense in his right hand. But because the fire pan was so heavy, plus it's hot, he wouldn't be able to hold it till he reached all the way inside, till the holy ark. Therefore, the rabbis dispensed with this decree, and they said, for this one time, you can switch. The Kohen Gadol would take the machta, the fire pan, in his right hand, the kaf haktoides bismaile, with the kaf in the incense inside of it in his left hand, and he would walk into the heichal and all the way through the heichal, through the area with the menorah, with the shulchan, with the mizbeach, all the way till he reached the Holy of Holies. Now, in the first temple, as we saw way in the beginning of this book, between the Holy and the Holy of Holies, there was a wall with a little doorway that had a curtain. So the Rambam says in the first temple times, Matzah hapareches prufa. He would find the curtain folded upwards, because both his hands are full. He can't move away the curtain, he's full with both hands. So they would fold it from before, he would come inside and walk straight in. Nichnas l'kodesh hakadashim, ad shehu magia la'aron. He would go all the way into the Holy of Holies till he reached the Holy Ark. Of course, also only in the first temple when there was a Holy Ark. Higia la'aron, once he reaches the Holy Ark, noisin hamachta ben shnei habadim, he places the fire pan right between the two poles and begins the ketairas procedure, as we'll soon describe it in a second. Now this is all in the first temple. Ubebayis sheni, in the second temple. Shaloi haya aron, there was no Holy Ark, haya manichal even ashasiyah, he would put it on the foundation stone. There was an open area of earth where Hashem created the world from. He would put it on that stone. Now, by the way, there was another difference between the first and second temples, in that the second temple, there was two curtains. As we saw in the beginning of this book, they didn't know where that wall went. When it was time to build the second temple, they were in doubt whether the wall occupied the space of the Holy or the Holy of Holies. So instead of making a wall, they built two curtains. So the high priest actually had to walk through the two curtains before he could reach the Holy Ark, or the foundation stone. There was no ark in the second temple. Anyways, he comes to wherever he's supposed to offer the incense. Let's just say the first temple, it's between the poles of the ark. Okay? Now, here's what he has to do. You would think he has the kaf with the ketairas, just pour the incense onto the fire pan. No. The same way he originally got the ketairas in his cupful, he has to get it back into his hands. Now you tell me, how do you do that? You have a kaf, if you're going to fill it up, if you pick it up with your left hand, he had this much ketairas in his cupful, in his handful. So he has to have both hands free. So the Rambam now describes one of the most difficult services in the temple. What he had to do was, he needed to grab hold of the kaf with his fingertips, the edges of his fingers, or with his teeth. And use his thumb to push out the incense into his cupful, which he's holding his hands out, until he returns it all to being exactly filling his cup, his two hands. The Zui Avodah Kasha Shabamikdash, this was a very tough service in the Holy Temple. Now that he has all the Ketores in his hands, he piles up all the incense on the coals to the front of him, pours it outwards in front into the fire pan, stretching it out. So the incense should be closer to the ark, further from his face, so he shouldn't burn. The moment the incense hits the fiery coals, the smoke begins to come out. He needs to wait until the entire room was filled with smoke, then he would go out. And when he left, he walked backwards, slowly but surely, facing the holy, back to the heichal, till he left the curtain. After he left, he would pray in the heichal, tefillah ktsara, a very short prayer, not to scare the people. Maybe they're going to think he died, so he spends the minimum amount of time. This is what he would say. He would pray a specific prayer. He would say, may it be the will of Hashem. If it was decreed that this year is supposed to be dry, let it be rainy. The rod of kingship shouldn't leave the house of Judah. Your people Israel shouldn't require each other for sustenance. They should each make a living in an honorable way. And the prayers of the travelers who don't want it to rain, you shouldn't listen to their prayers. Make it rain so that the farmers in Israel can grow their crop. When it was time to offer the Ketores in the Holy of Holies, nobody could be in the heichal, but only in the heichal. They didn't have to move away. They didn't have to move away from this area between the ulam and the mizbeach. Usually, on a regular day's ketores, they had to, but on the Yom Kippur ketores, you have to just leave the actual heichal, not this area. You only have to go away from this area when they were bringing the ketores every day, and when blood was sprinkled in the heichal, which is actually coming up soon, the blood service. As we explained in the laws of the daily sacrifice. So now it's time for the blood service. The ketores is done. He comes out. He goes to the Kohen, the guy who was mixing the blood. Where's our guy over here? Here's our guy. He's mixing the blood. Kohen Gadol comes over to him, takes the blood of the bull, and comes into the Holy of Holies. Sprinkling 8 times between the poles of the aron, once upwards, 7 downwards. And he goes out. He places it on a little stand. It was a small stand of gold where he would place this cup down while he was waiting, because there was also going to be goat's blood now sprinkled. He leaves the heichal, slaughters the goat and receives its blood, the goat from the raffle. That was the one that went for Hashem. The nichnas goes into the Holy of Holies, and sprinkles also 8 times between the poles of the Holy Ark. He would go out and put it onto the second stand. There was 2 stands of gold in the heichal, one for the bull's blood, one for the goat's blood. Then he takes the bull's blood from the stand. He would sprinkle on the outside of the curtain, opposite the place of where the aron was, also 8 times. Places down the bull's blood, takes the goat's blood. Also 8 times sprinkling on the pareches opposite the ark. Then he mixes the 2 bloods. He pours the bull's blood into the goat's blood, pours it back into the cup that had the bull's blood, so they're very well mixed. Then he goes into the holy area, standing inwards of the golden mizbeach, between the mizbeach and the menorah, and he begins to apply the blood on the 4 corners of the golden mizbeach. He circles it, not physically, but with his finger. Sprinkling the outside of the 4 corners. He begins with the northeastern corner, goes to the northwestern corner, to the southwestern corner, to the southeastern corner. Now, because he's standing in one place, when he puts out his hand, he applies the blood to each corner, going from down to up. Because it's best if you go furthest from yourself and go up. That's how you keep the cleanest. Chutz min ha'achrina, except for the last corner, shahaisa lefanav, in front of him, shehu nesen milmailon lemata, in which you go downwards. Because if you go upwards, you risk getting your shirt dirty, your sleeve dirty. So the clothes don't get dirty. After applying it to the four corners, he clears away the ashes that was in the middle of the mizbeach from the ketores in the morning, till he reveals the golden surface. And he sprinkles from the mixture of the blood onto the actual mizbeach 7 times on the south side, where he stopped applying to the corners over here. This was the last corner, so he applies it over here. And he goes out and pours out the rest of the blood, pours it all out on the western base of the outer mizbeach. And now he starts to take care of the goat to be sent away. He comes to the goat that's going to be sent away. Puts both his hands on his head, actually on its head, and recites confession. Here's what he would say. This time it was a confession on behalf of the Jewish people. Ana Hashem, please God, your nation Israel sinned before you. Ana Hashem, please God, please forgive all the sins which your people Israel did. As the Torah of Moses, your servant, says, on this day God atones for you, and everyone would bow down again. Then he sends off the goat to the desert to push off the cliff. While the goat's being walked, he takes the innards of the bull and the goat which he offered the blood inside, puts them into a utensil, sending off the rest to the outside of the temple premises to be burnt, where they have to be burnt. And once he gets the news that this goat reached the desert, he goes out to read the Torah as we explained yesterday. Then he washes his hands and feet, concluding the Yom Kippur service, takes off all his white clothes. The Toivel goes to the mikvah, puts on the golden clothes again. And washes his hands and feet. Then he performs the goat, the remaining goat from the Musaf sacrifice. Included in the Musaf daily Musaf Yom Kippur sacrifices. He also offers his personal ram and the communal ram from the Musaf sacrifice. As it says, he goes out and performs his burnt offering and the nation's burnt offering. And he also offers the innards of the bull and the goat that were burnt, and the daily afternoon sacrifice. Then he washes his hands and feet, takes off the golden clothes. The Toivel goes to the mikveh, and puts on the white clothes. Washes hands and feet. White clothes for what? Just for one thing. He goes back to the Holy of Holies to take out the incense pan and cup that had the ketores, because he has to get them back, otherwise they're going to stay inside. Wash hands and feet again. And take off the white clothes. Toivel goes to the mikveh, puts on the golden clothes, and washes his hands and feet. And now concludes the daily service. Here's the guy taking out the incense stuff from the Kodesh HaKodashim. Back to the gold clothes, he offers the afternoon incense, and lights the candles for the afternoon service, like every other day. Then washes his hands and feet, takes off the golden clothes, takes back into his regular clothes, and he goes back to his house. Why say these words? Goes back, obviously go back to your house. Says the Rabbi one time, Yom Kippur service began by removing the high priest from his house. Yom Kippur service ends by going back to his house. And Hasidic philosophy speaking, if Yom Kippur doesn't end by bringing Yom Kippur home, it's not a real Yom Kippur. High priest was on a high, but if he doesn't come back to his family and do what he has to do, then the whole thing was worthless. So the Rambam, as part of halacha, says the high priest must go home, back to regular family life. The entire Jewish people would escort him to his house. And he would make a holiday, celebration to Hashem, thanking him for allowing him to exit the Holy of Holies in peace without being damaged. And again, this is the same idea, bringing the holiness down to earth.